Hey, Tracy Ariel here, just talking to you about creative solopreneur life. I'm talking this week about mindfulness because, as you know, if you've been listening to my blog, my of the week, word of the year, excuse me, this year is peaceful. And so I thought it would be good to investigate mindfulness. And it was fascinating because there's a bunch of stuff going on that I didn't know even here in Montreal. Recently, I was having a conversation with Elizabeth, my friend, and I was talking to her about my feeling that prayer, when it's deep enough, can be mindfulness. And because both of them require a belief that we're part of a wider entity. If you're Christian like me, you believe in a God, but I mean, you can also believe in a wholeness between people. You can believe in power as energy. It doesn't really matter what you believe, but in order to be mindful, fully mindful, and to meditate, you really need to believe in a higher entity of some sort, even if it's just you and everybody else in one meld of energy. Anyway, there's a lot of resources out there for anyone who's interested in looking into mindfulness. I know that several of you listen to Tara Brock's show about meditation, and that's fabulous. There's also something called mindful.org. Mindfulness Wikipedia even has a ton of sources. It talks about all of the clinical psychologists and psychiatry investigations into meditation since the 1970s and some of the therapeutic applications based on mindfulness for helping people alleviate depression or relieve stress and anxiety or treat drug addiction, cope with crises. There's a particular person called John Kabat-Zinn who uses mindfulness in schools, in prisons, hospitals, and veteran centers. So I went down a rabbit hole reading all about him when I was reading through mindfulness. They also talk about someone called John Yates, and who talks about consciousness as two distinct modes, attention and peripheral awareness. And he defines mindfulness as the perfect interaction between those two things. And so the site which links to him talks about the use of mindfulness in education, business, law, and government. And that was fascinating as well. I don't know if you've referred to the mindfulnessmontreal.com website as well. I didn't realize it, but there's three Montreal practitioners, Dr. Adrienne Hillet from Clinique Psyché, Dr. Joe Flanders from Mindspace, and Muriel I think her name is pronounced Joich, but I don't really know for sure. And she's from True North Insight. And they've created a collaborative community nonprofit association called Mindfulness Montreal. And since Ailey works at the University of Montreal and Flanders works at McGill and Joik seems to have some sort of link to UQAM, the collaboration links three of our universities too. The organization is holding an event and April 19th to April 22nd. The full weekend costs $525, but individual presentations cost $40 or $50, depending on which ones you want to attend. So if you're in Montreal, you may want to take advantage of that. Actually, even if you're not in Montreal, come visit us. April, the snow should be gone by then, and it should be really a wonderful time to visit. Also, there's the Mindspace Clinic, and University of Montreal also has some events every now and then. So I'll put the link to their to the collaborative space event in the show notes. But when it comes to prayer and meditation, I'm not the only one who links meditation to create Christian spirituality. And as I was reading about this, I discovered there's a big network of people working on the centering prayer movement or contemplative prayer, all of which links Christianity and mindfulness and meditation even. As a matter of fact, there is a Christian mode of thought which assumes three different levels of prayer. The first one is prayer, the prayer that everybody knows, with saying words out loud. Our Father, some of the other kinds of prayers that exist. Then the second one is actually meditation. And then the third one is contemplation. So it was fascinating reading about contemplative prayer. I guess our current Pope really admires someone by the name of Thomas Merton, who I didn't know Thomas Merton, although I should have. Anyway, he practiced Catholicism as Father Louis, and or maybe Father Louis, I'm not sure because it's spelled Louis. Anyway, he describes a traditional practice of prayer that's centered entirely on the presence of God. And he also wrote The Seven-Story Mountain in 1948, and that's the one that was really popular when I was a kid. All sorts of famous people were going to, I think even Leonard Cohen went to study Buddhism in part from reading that. There's also a contemplative society on Salt Spring Island, and almost every Catholic church has a link to at least one of the contemplative groups. Christchurch Cathedral, for example, on St. Catherine Street West, has talks and silent meditation from 5:45 until 6:45, the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And there's a place called Meckham in LaSalle, not that far from me. They didn't have their events on their website, but they're not too far, so I'm probably going to go visit and find out what they do there. And there's also the Centering Prayer Movement, which holds meditation events every Monday evening at 7 p.m. at Isabella Street in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. And that's based on the movement started by Thomas Keating, which you can look at. I'll put the links to the show notes as well. Now, a lot of this links to a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, which apparently it was written anonymously in the 14th century, but it was probably written by an English monk. And this particular book promoted a prayer in which you keep silent as long as possible and just notice thoughts as they occur without paying attention to them. And so I am really interested in exploring that in my mode of peace this year. And I invite you to join me if you want to. If you don't, explore mindfulness in your own way. And if you have any comments about any of this, then feel free to make them in the show notes or in the comments section below. Thanks, and talk to you next week.